Big KPA show to start off the week. We got sound bites, we got stat projections, and MVP talk? Big deep news. There might need to start being some awards for being the king of media availability, because for damn sure, our guy Kenny Pickett would be the top dog from this offseason. He'd be taking that award home. But with that being said, we do have another one. We have another Kenny Pickett interview. This one is with Chris Long from the Green Lights podcast. And the question or the soundbite we're going to be going over here is Long asking Pickett if he has any goals for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I just want to master our system. Going into a second year, I feel like this spring I took, really command of our offense and what we're doing, and being heavily involved with Coach Canada and Coach Tomlin on what I like, what I don't like, to kind of tailor our offense to the best, to what I do best, what the guys around me do best, and what we want to do, from a schematic standpoint. I really want to master the system and run the show. So that's what I'm working towards.
This is actually the second time Pickett's been asked about goals for the upcoming year, and both have been answered in different ways. The first one was from 93.7 The Fan, and I think it was pointed a little bit more of like, what would your stats goals be? And this was his response to that.
The individual goals, and I go back to like my time at Pitt, like if you win a championship, I guarantee 80% of the starters hit the goals that they have set for themselves. So that's like the best advice that I could give people is like, guys are playing for, like different contracts, or they want, these kind of numbers. Like, man, the guys that get paid, the guys that are on all these first team, all pros, whatever, they're all in the championship teams are those guys. Like that's how it works. You can go back to the Pitt team and look at all the guys that were all ACC, the guys that got drafted off that team, the guys that are, had opportunities at the next level, on that team. Like that's how it works. So I know, everything will kind of take care of itself. So I don't know. I didn't really answer your question, but
so you don't write down numbers.
Yeah, you're not like a write down goals like above the bed, the old school, like above your bed in high school, writing down stat goals. You're not doing that.
No, I think I'm definitely just Super Bowl. That's really it. And if you're in the Super Bowl and you win it, man, I think all the goals that you ever had set are pretty much going to be met.
He's right. Who gives a shit about the stats? That don't get remembered. The winning does. But in terms of his more recent answer about taking more control of the offense, I wonder if that's going to be giving us some insider intel in what we're going to be seeing from the Steelers 2023 offense and how it might look different from the years prior with Canada being the OC, because there have been some leaks. There have been some reports out there that Canada has not really allowed his quarterback to make audibles. One, you have Pat Fryermuth's answer from the Big Ben podcast.
I tell Canada this all the time. It's so different because we didn't have Haas.
Yeah.
So like with you, like we have a concept, and like how many times do we have a concept and you look at Tay and you just give him a signal and it would be a 12-yard completion. You know what I'm saying? So we didn't have that this year. So.
But also there were definitely some reports out there during Big Ben's last season that even he wasn't given full autonomy of the offense like he should have been, given that he is the GOAT. But I digress. Hashtag the sabotage. So what I'm hoping is Matt Canada could get his head on straight and let the quarterback make some audibles. If he needs a hot route, if he's seeing things at the line of scrimmage, let him be able to change a play. I mean, I feel like that's like a bare minimum that you should be allowing your quarterback to do. He is the leader of the offense on the field, no? Now, I could maybe understand it a little bit more from last year just because Kenny is a rookie. But damn, I mean, there's no question the GOAT should have been able to do whatever the hell he wanted to do the whole game in his last season. Now, obviously, we got to see more of that towards the fourth quarter. And I don't think it was a coincidence he led the league in game-winning drives that season. But don't even take it from me. This is something that Charlie Batch talked about on the podcast months ago when he was asked what does he want to see from Kenny Pickett going from year one to year two. And basically, it was just, I want to see him get more control of the offense and be able to make audibles and be able to call the shots on the field.
The only thing that I want to see with him improving on is the fact of Matt Canada allowing him more control at the line of scrimmage. Because last year I made it, I said, I came out and I said, hey, there is no audibles in this particular system. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And it wasn't until they asked Matt Canada that question and Matt verified that and said, no, the quarterback can't audible. So if Kenny can now take that particular phase and now run it at the line of scrimmage and put the offense in the best possible situation, I can see that offense really trying to now, put up more numbers, and really hopefully be one of the top offenses in the league.
So it seems like everyone's in agreement in terms of what needs to happen with Pickett in the offense for 2023. You got me, you got Kenny, you also got Charlie Batch. Now it's just up to Canada. Let Kenny cook. But what does all this year 1 to year 2 jump mean for Kenny Pickett? How does it actually translate into stats, something tangible that we can look at? Because obviously, Kenny ain't going to be telling you anything. So that's why I'm here at Big Deke News. I'll give my 2023 stat projections for Kenny Pickett. But first, let's look back on what he did in 2022. So for yards, he had 2,404 yards passing, which ended up being on a per-game basis, 184.9 yards. We'll get into the yards conversation in a little bit. 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 237 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. So with the yards, those 2,400, and then it goes to, like I said, 184.9 yards per game. If you take that yards per game number, 184.9 times 17, because obviously Kenny didn't play in all 17 games, that adds up to 3,143 yards. So right there is a baseline. But may I remind you that yards per game number is a little bit skewed because Kenny only played a half in the Jets game. But again, that counts as a game. Played a half in the Buccaneers game and only played, I think it was 1 series in the Ravens game. So I feel like that yards per game number is actually closer to 200. So if you do 200 times 17 games, that is 3,400 yards. Like that is what Kenny would have gotten last year if he would have been healthy for every game played in all 17 games. Now I get it, it's football. You can't really account for that completely. But 3,400 is already, just based off of his rookie year, not out of question at all. I actually feel like that is a very realistic expectation. But then you have the 7 touchdowns. I would say automatically off the top of my head, I could think of like 5 or 6 touchdowns that were left out there, whether it was Kenny barely missing the receiver, like barely floating it over him, or there were drops in the end zone, or like in week 18, Deontay Johnson literally getting tackled at the 1-yard line before he can punch it in. So that, I'd say if you actually watch the games, that felt more like a 13 or 14 touchdown season. You take that over 17 games, it's probably closer to 20. And then with the 9 interceptions, since I've been breaking down the yards and the touchdowns and kind of showing you what it would look like over a 17-game season, I have to do the same with 9. But I will say this, you have to remember how Kenny Pickett finished last season. He only had 1 interception over those last 8 or 9 games since the bye. I feel like if you watch Kenny Pickett at Pitt, you know his mentality and how he's just simply trying to win games, and he knows how important taking care of the ball is, particularly with this team. When we have a good defense, we have a good running game, a good O-line. He's not going to be willy-nilly and gunslinger out there just tossing it all over the field. I feel like what we saw from week 10 on last year is more of what we're going to be seeing from Kenny Pickett going forward. He's going to take care of the ball. And if you look at a bunch of those interceptions that were happening in his first however many starts, a lot of them can be attributed to receivers and them hitting off receivers' hands. I'd argue probably 3 or 4 of them. Claypool falling, hitting off Claypool's hands, 1 hitting off Freiermuth's hands. Yeah, that's at least off the top of my head right there. And then with the 237 rushing and 3 touchdowns, yeah, I don't really see that going away. Maybe that ends up being like 400 or 500 rushing yards and the 3 touchdowns goes to like 4 or 5 because we're going to be doing QB sneaks at the goal line. So, in total, I talked about the 3,400 yards as kind of a baseline. It's probably what those stats would have extrapolated out in Kenny's rookie season if, again, he would have played in all 17 games fully healthy. The touchdowns, I think you get up to at least low 20s passing touchdowns. That's definitely not far-fetched. The rushing yards, 400-ish touchdowns. We'll say 4 rushing touchdowns. And then those 3,400 yards, let's just say it gets up to like 3,700. The interceptions, I truly believe it's going to be 10 or less. So what does that come out to be? 3,700 passing yards. Let's say 23 passing touchdowns. And then we'll just say 10 picks, whatever. We'll say 9 picks, actually. Make it look cleaner. And then rushing, 400 rushing yards, and then 4 touchdowns. I'd take that. And that passing touchdown total might even be on the low end. Like 23, I could see it at least reaching 25 as well. Like I think that could be the range between like 23 and 27. And then when you combine the rushing touchdowns, I really do think it's feasible for 30 total touchdowns for Kenny Pickett in year 2. But I will say this. I don't really... Now, this could be a cop-out. You could view this as a cop-out thing to say, but I don't really care about Pickett's stats for year 2, to be honest with you, because what we were doing in the latter portion of last year was very much working and was helping us win games, and that is run the ball, control the clock, and play really good defense. And then for Pickett, make clutch throws when you need to. It doesn't necessarily translate to the gaudiest of stats, but it does translate to winning games. And I feel like with the schedule that we have and how everything's laid out, we could just take that formula and do the same thing for 2023 and win games. Now, obviously, I do think there are improvements that need to be made for the offense. I think we need to expand the playbook a little bit more. I think we need to have a little bit more explosive plays. Maybe we do pass it a little bit more with Kenny, but at the same time, winning games is winning games. And let's go back to Big Ben and his rookie season, his second season. He wasn't thrown for the most pass attempts in the league or was able to have the most gaudiest of fantasy stats, but did it matter? No, because we were winning, and that's the most important goal for a quarterback as the leader of a team or a leader of an offense. That's something Ben has said himself, and it seems like Kenny feels that way as well based off his answers. Ben showed it in those first 2 years, going 13-0 his rookie season, then winning a Super Bowl in his second. And it's not like it's in spite of the quarterback, too, because there are quarterbacks that can win, and just because their team's so loaded, they're almost winning in spite of the quarterback, a la Trent Dilfer with those 2000s Baltimore Ravens. You could have stuck any quarterback in there. But no, Big Ben, obviously it was different. It wasn't coincidence. We went 6-10 the year before we drafted him, and then all of a sudden we go 15-1, and then we win a Super Bowl in his second year, and he is on the Steelers for the next 18 years and is our franchise quarterback's Hall of Famer. So, like, that's not a coincidence at all. You get what I mean? Like, you're watching the games, you know when you have a guy, you know when that guy has the it factor, and I think that's what I'm trying to say with Kenny. Like, I don't care what the stats are going to say. It's like, does this dude know how to win games? Does this dude know how to lead an offense? Is he making the throws when they need to be made? Is he coming up clutch? And we got to see that the Ravens game, the Raiders game, and just the fact that we went 7-1. It depends on how you want to mark it up, but like we went 7-1 when he was predominantly the quarterback after the bye week, because obviously Mitch came in for him in the Ravens game, and I feel like if Kenny was in there, we end up winning that, but I think the loss gets attributed to KP8 anyway. But you get what I'm saying. Now, with all that being said, do those numbers I was talking about, could that get Kenny into the MVP discussions? Is that too far-fetched? Here's what Ronde Barber had to say about his dark horse MVP candidate for 2023. Dark horse candidates are always bad bets because they're always on average-ass teams and they need everything to go right for their team to win. Kenny Pickett showed that he has some serious game down the stretch in 2022 and that he is suited for the NFL. He's got 2 really good young receivers and a stud tight end. If the Pittsburgh Steelers defense rebounds, he'll get them into the playoffs. Obviously, I'm cool with Ronde's answer here, and I don't think it's a bad answer because there's a few things that got to go right for a person to be in MVP discussions. Well, actually, first, the other names that were mentioned as dark horse candidates were Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, and Trey Lance. So, yeah, if those guys are being mentioned, why can't Kenny Pickett? But for a guy to be in the MVP running, your team has to be good, right? You have to have probably like at least 12 or 13 wins, one of the top seeded teams in the league. And I think the Steelers have a chance to do that. So obviously, if Kenny is the quarterback of a team that is winning 12 plus games, then yeah, that's the first step in the right direction of being in the MVP conversation. But you also have to put up some stats to get the writers' attention, right? And the ones that I brought up, is that enough? Probably not. Probably not, although it's damn close. And what I'm saying here is if Kenny could exceed my projections by like 10 to 20%, so those, let's say, 23 to 25 passing touchdowns get up, and it's more like 27 or 28, plus the 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. That's like, what, 32, 33 total touchdowns? And then you get those 3,800 passing yards up to more like 4,000. Let's just say the rushing yards stay around 300 or 400. And the Steelers are winning games. Like, you are in the conversation. Now, I do think Kenny's candidacy would be a little bit more dependent on what other guys are doing around the league, like a Patrick Mahomes. If Mahomes is having like a little bit of a down year, or guys that are putting up gaudy fantasy stats are having a little bit of a down year from the stat perspective, or maybe their teams are a little bit more down than what was expected, then yeah, I think Kenny has a chance. Now, what does that mean? His overall chances of getting an MVP, because all these variables have to add up, I don't know, but I think it would be worth a shot if you're willing to put a couple bucks on it. Like, if you look on the betting apps, Pickett's odds for the MVP is at plus 4,000. $10 would get you $400 in return. So that's why they call it like a dark horse candidate. Not the most likely of outcomes necessarily, but again, worth a flyer. But that's it for this edition of Big Deke News on a Monday. Let me know your thoughts on Kenny Pickett and this upcoming season. What are you looking for out of him? What do you think his stat projections should be? Expectations? Is he in the MVP discussion as a dark horse? Do you think Canada will give Pickett the reins and let him make some audibles and hot routes and whatnot? I damn sure hope so. But again, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Stay chilling and peace.